Welcome to Value-Based Voices, a podcast from the Association for Value-Based Cancer Care. Each episode dives into the shifting terrain of cancer care in the United States, exploring what value means in today's clinical, policy, and patient-centered environments. Our mission is to spark informed dialogue, promote transparency, and equip every stakeholder, from providers to payers to patients, with the insight they need to navigate cancer care with clarity, confidence, and purpose. This morning, we're going to be talking a lot about the value and the importance of the research that's going on today, and certainly the impact that we all have in people's lives by being involved in this. My name is Matt Vossler, Managing Director of DSG Executive Global Search Company. I'm the co-chair of the Global Cancer Research and Innovation Symposium, and I'll be your host for the episode. With me this morning are GRIS scientific co-chairs, Dr. Nick Sarlis, Chief Medical Officer, Cleara Biotech, and Stan Skrzypczak, Managing Partner, 5' Science Consulting. Welcome.
Thank you.
Looking forward to a lively conversation.
You bet.
And talk about the event that's coming up and the anticipation we have and the excitement with the amazing array of talent that we have assembled. Let's get into a little bit about the history of GRIS. And, I have to begin with Bert, who is just been incredible in terms of our board of directors with Swim Across America, as well as the founder and executive director of the Association for Value-Based Cancer Care. This idea for the GRIS event really grew up a couple of years ago out of discussions that Bert had with a number of our key swim investigators, principally Jed Walchuk. And what we really were looking for was a platform to highlight the amazing work that our researchers are doing in the labs all across the country, as well as talk about the model, which is very unique in terms of going in and identifying young investigators and physician scientists and funding their programs, generally funding high-risk, high-reward types of programs that normally would not be on the radar with FDA. But let me step back a little bit with Swim Across America. It's an organization that we started coming up on 40 years ago, swimming across bodies of water throughout the United States to raise money for cancer research. The model really was built at Memorial Sloan Kettering to focus on just that, young investigators and physician scientists. They had said to us, even back in the 90s, this was an area that was in great need of support. We just weren't getting the dollars and the resources in to fund these young investigators. Today, now more than ever, it's a critical time to be funding the young talent that we have in this country and keeping them here as well. So we really want to highlight a lot of the important sessions and topics that we'll be getting into with GRIS. And, today really take a deep dive into why now. Why is GRIS so important? What is happening in the environment that we see that need us to really make this a successful event and continue that critical funding? Love to get your input, Stan.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Matt, and it's really a pleasure to be here and be a part of the GRIS family. I don't think that there's ever been a greater time to think about innovation and really how to continue to propel the work that we've been doing in cancer research over the last decades than to bring together the right stakeholders. And the right stakeholders aren't just the pharma, aren't just the researchers, but we've seen it also includes our policymakers and our regulators. And even if we go further deeper into that sphere, our investors. And how are investors now thinking about this potentially new world order that we're faced with now? So while we've seen sort of changes that have happened in the past, I think the time is now to look at how the three of these legs of the tripod can really work together come up with innovative solutions and really continue to advance innovation and technology in the U.S., in particular for cancer research.
Yeah, great. And, the funding gap, obviously, with all that's happening with NIH, we're really seeing a need to keep this line of support open. Could you talk to that?
Absolutely, Matt, and I second every word that Stan said. In fact, it is indeed my distinct honor as a physician scientist myself, and having kind of had a career both in the academic world and in the biotech pharma world. We see these very complex problems and challenges that have defied solutions in years and decades. And the only way to really resolve these problems, or at least start visioning these solutions, is bringing people together in an open environment where they can talk to each other and communicate with each other with no silos and no compartments. And I think this is what this meeting is all about. And I will basically expand the abbreviation again, because it's global, albeit US focused, obviously, Cancer Research Innovation Symposium. And I think, the title says everything. So you have the pillars that are the academic investigators, the regulators, the investors, all the ecosystem. And in fact, it stands, as you mentioned, Matt, on the pediment of venture philanthropy.
Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's just a critical time, for that approach from a philanthropic perspective, as well as from a science-based perspective. And the investor world has to look at the importance of funding entire programs and moving programs forward. And let's talk about the science. I mean, what's going on? I keep hearing that this is the best time probably in the history of mankind, where we've got incredible advances, the technology, the talent, the science. To talk to that, Stan, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So I think that a couple of very interesting developments are happening in parallel that make for a perfect storm. One, you've got the tools that you need to build the types of next-gen drugs that we're considering. We're seeing advances in single-cell sequencing, in spatial transcriptomics, and whole genome sequencing done at scale that unlock a variety of different understandings of biological pathways. We're also seeing the explosion in AI as a tool that could be used to streamline large, massive sets of data that could be useful for determining drug resistance pathways. So, you look at those two factors, and then you see how the drug development cycle itself has been not necessarily lengthened, but shortened. What used to take years to try to think through the right types of patient cohorts, the right type of study design, has been abbreviated dramatically in the last several years by advances in AI. So I think, when you look at that confluence, it's an exciting time. We're seeing some very interesting activity, in particular in the CAR T space. I think over the last year, there's been over $10 billion, 10 with a B, dollars of acquisitions for in vivo CAR Ts, which is an area we're going to explore in day one of our GRIS session. I think some of the other advances that we're seeing on other modalities is equally interesting, thinking about moving beyond what we historically considered checkpoint inhibition. How are we using alternative modes of interventions to really amplify what we see as early responses? So the science is there, the tools are there. Now we just got to bring it together into the drug development paradigm and make it real for patients.
Yeah. And some are calling this, Nick, a biotech 2.0 moment. And this is certainly something that we wanted to bring out and promote with GRIS and with all the sessions and the people that we have. But I'd love to hear you talk about that biotech 2.0 moment.
You bet. And what Stan mentioned is that, yes, the science has progressed with leaps and bounds, but at the same time, so has the complexity, right? And so it's not just throwing technology and throwing money to the problem. I think one of the fundamental motivators of actually getting together the GRIS Symposium is to bring the stakeholders together, to have them cross-understand the complexity and where are the core challenges that I think everybody sees from a different angle. It's actually seeing the diamond from its angles, and what have been the lessons learned from one discipline to the other. Perhaps note some of the success stories, and where these success stories have limitations, talking about deliverability of CAR-T, distribution of CAR-T, novel methods for cellular therapies, hitting the ceiling on immunotherapy, and what kind of new modalities do we need. And so we have, on one hand, a ton of new MOAs, perhaps even more targets that we can handle on an individual basis, or even in a big company in a portfolio. And I think we need more communication, more collaboration. And this is the venue to actually do that. And it's actually a very unique venue, because you know, most of us go to 6 or a dozen meetings, every year. And you kind of hear things from a siloed approach. And I think that the GRIS Symposium is really unique in bringing the stakeholders with openness and willingness to discuss really the core challenges and start visioning solutions.
Yeah. And, I think, Nick, building on that, I think a lot of meetings that I've seen in the past are somewhat siloed insofar as you might have a meeting dedicated to policy. You might have a meeting dedicated to science. You may have a meeting for the investors where they hear about the companies they've invested in, or the publicly traded companies discussing their most recent earnings. This kind of brings together everyone to address, how are we all going to make this happen? The drug development cycle, how are we going to make it happen? How are we going to bring these investments that are being made to patients? How are we going to make it happen? And then ultimately, how are we going to move the needle forward with regulators to make sure that the proper pathways are engendered to really make these all things happen for patients? So I think it's kind of a very unique setting to bring those three together, and that's why I'm particularly excited.
Yeah, I've always been impressed with the openness of the meeting. And, again, we all go and do the whole list. We just came off of AACR recently, and ASCO coming up. This is unique. And to me, it is because it's, in terms of the size, in terms of the ability to network and meet some of the key people, and really talk transparently about what are some of the challenges and what are the things that we need to do to find solutions. Give me a sense, who are we targeting? What type of person really is going to benefit from coming to GRIS and experiencing our day and a half? So let's step back for a second. So this year is unique, as you know. The first half day is really going to be focused on investors. So, pharma, biotech, business development and licensing types of executives. We're also going to be bringing in, the venture firms, as well as Wall Street analysts, family offices, and really everybody that kind of lives in that ecosystem of early stage or developmental stage investment in these types of cancer therapeutics. But give me your sense. Why would I come? Why is this different from an investor's perspective to attend this meeting?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why I'm very pleased with working with Nick on this, that we've constructed kind of a half day to really be more of the peek into the tent, so to speak, of what's going on with some of the M&A activity, what's going on with areas that are in need of some innovative solutions. Venture philanthropy is an area we're exploring. And then the last area, which I'm very pleased to see, we're able to work with the CZ BioHub and have a exploratory discussion on what they're doing with the Billion Cells project. I think that's really cutting edge in terms of where the future is, which is ideally what a lot of the investor types really like to, understand and key in on. Day two is really the biopharma day. Now, that's not to say the investment community isn't interested to hear directly from the KOLs that are in the trenches, that are doing the drug development, that are building these innovative compounds about what's going on day two. But day two is really the pharma executives that are involved in drug development, portfolio management, IT, or I should say AI, IT specialists, and the CROs that are an important element of the ecosystem to bring these forward. So it really is, I think, a little of both for the investment community as well as for the clinicians and for the people that are in the drug development side of the business. I think one of the other, so to speak, sessions that I'm very interested to hear is we have 3 industry leaders in the biopharma industry that are going to be discussing sort of what's sitting on the lap of a executive, a CMO, as you think about what it's going to take to bring what's going on in their research and development labs to phase 1, to phase 2, and then operationalize that. So it's a very interesting meeting for all types that are involved in the drug development management life cycle. And I think we're closing it today, I think, with some of the Swim Across America pioneers, Jed Wolchuk, Luis Diaz, Andrea Skrzypczak, that have been doing a lot of work, and have them explain, hey, this investment was made in my lab years ago. Well, here's what we've done now. So it's really kind of a nice closing of the loop for what I think is going to be a really provocative and informative 1.5 day sessions.
So, Nick, as a CMO, really understanding the challenges for several years that biotech has faced from a funding perspective, really from trying to move those programs forward in the clinic. Give us a sense of what a CMO would be looking for in this type of meeting, and really the types of people that you'd be looking to interact with.
No, absolutely, and I'll pick up from where Stan left on the rest of the half of the first day and the second day, which I think is really highlighting the science. So you have fairly high level C-suite people, both from big pharma and biotech, and I think we have the presentations, but we also have the moderators and the panels, and truly uniquely curated topics that are actually looking at the future. I think the CMO role has become increasingly more complex and challenging because it's not just looking at what is happening in the portfolio or in the asset or in the platform today, but where will these assets or portfolios be 3 to 5 years from now, perhaps even a decade from now. I mean, most of us are now living in a 2030 horizon. And it's not just the current funding, but what kind of funding will one demand and expect when you are at the pivotal stage, or when you're making a first-in-class or best-in-class effort to enter the market and persuade regulators and persuade payers and so on and so forth, and eventually have benefit for unmet medical need for patients and society at large. And I think this is where the crux is. I will also add the fact that we have third-party CMOs and CDMOs and CROs that are extremely important in the ecosystem, because this is where the operational technology is coming in as well. Patient selection for trials, optimization of protocols, preparation of documents. And again, a lot of people feel that this is more tactical, but if you don't do these things with modern technology and current look into the future, you're losing time, and you're losing time on patents, you're losing market reimbursement time, and at the end of the day, patients are waiting for new drugs.
So really, as I talked earlier about the genesis of the idea to create this meeting, really came from, a number of our KOLs who thought that it was important that with all the programs that Swim Across America funds across the country, by the way, we have between $8 and $10 million invested at any given time, in 40 plus institutions that are engaged in levels of basic research and translational research. It was really critical to them to try to create a meeting where we started talking to each other. We started sharing ideas. Love to hear your thoughts on what day 2 of this meeting really looks like, and how we really try to promote that.
Yeah, so as we already discussed, I think it's intergroup collaboration opportunities, and obviously every meeting has that, but to just be more specific, as you mentioned, academics are the innovators, and in essence, a lot of academic spin-offs become biotech, and so academics and biotech are the innovators, and so we do recognize and acknowledge the source of innovation. But I think it's a great meeting for the academics and the biotech leaders to really realize the need for the appropriateness of funding, and that at the end of the day, the market is the crucible of value, right? And looking at where the vision is going in oncology in the next, I would say, 5 to 7 years, which is basically the horizon that we're operating right now, will also focus these academic investigators to enhance the innovation, right? And so, because innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? And that's how we have MOAs that come and go out of favor, so to speak. What new drugs we need to combine. We can talk about synthetic lethality, about combinations, about sequencing, about things that are becoming more and more important, because at this point, no one is using, at the end of the day, monotherapy to cure cancer. So there are a lot of platforms and ideas that I think this meeting can bring forth, and look at strategic insight, both for academia and for biopharma, big pharma, and the funding community.
Yeah, yeah. And and one of the other thoughts on this meeting as well was to not only highlight and promote our young investigators, but also give them the opportunity to meet some of our KOLs. Absolutely. So, for example, last year, we had a great inaugural meeting, and we brought in Tom Lynch from Fred Hutch. We had Steve Rosen from City of Hope, Jed Walchuk, Luis Diaz, many of our top people. I know Larry Norton gave a very rousing, discussion on what he sees as the values of give me a sense. Who do we have on deck this year? Who are some of the names that are going to wow us and really give our young investigators a chance to meet the people who then potentially become their mentors and, certainly their main connectors going forward from a career perspective?
Yeah, so I think you've mentioned, so to speak, the main highlighted individuals that have been with us for quite some time. The session I'm most interested in is the one we have Jeff Legos from Pfizer, who's agreed to speak at the roundtable that'll be moderated by Skip Burris, Sunil Verma from AZ, and more recently, Mark Rutstein from Novartis. So now we have 3 pharmas that collectively, from a market cap perspective, occupy a tremendous amount of space that we have on the agenda floor. So I think that that aspect is particularly interesting. On the early stage innovation side, one session we're doing, which deals with pediatric oncology, is quite interesting. And Andrew Kung, who's the chair for pediatric oncology at MSK, who I think has trained half the pediatric oncologists in the country, is going to be doing an interesting session on what we've learned or what we can learn from pediatric oncology. Case in point, CAR-Ts were instituted at Children's Hospital in Pennsylvania. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what's new, what that really cutting-edge research field is working toward. And then I think we're going to get involved with corporate partnerships and talk a little bit more about sort of what's the ball that's headed in that vein. So a number of folks that we brought in are going to gain that perspective on enhancing value through corporate partnerships, et cetera. So I think, we've got it stacked in a way that speaks to not only the scientific side, that speaks to the drug development side, but also talks to what I call the business of oncology. So I'm particularly excited to hear the discussions, all moderated, no slides, purposefully done. Slides get to be a little bit cumbersome, and again, takes away the script that folks don't necessarily want to come here to hear. They want to hear the unmiked version. So I think that it should be an engaging part of our discussions.
Excellent.
And just to supplement what Stan just said, I think we have put significant effort in mixing the panels in an appropriate way, so that you have big pharma and biotech and sometimes even academics talking at the same panel. And as I mentioned, they see the same diamond from different angles. But I think also the couple of the plenary session speakers, the panelists, the moderators, the discussants, even the audience, I think one of the things that is unique in this meeting is that they bring, without slides, unscripted, the totality of their experience. And that totality of experience is across the ecosystem. It's from early discovery, biology, preclinical development, all the transition into early clinical, from early clinical to late clinical, and even within a class or pipeline selection for what needs to be promoted and developed in the near future. So I think it's a really unique mixture, and I think people will get tremendous value out of this meeting.
Yeah, excellent. And of course, we've got the venue, which is just, historic and, just incredible to be, in for the day and a half or 2 days that we're there. There is a pool there, and we're not requiring, however, that our participants swim any laps, as it is a Swim Across America, partnered event. So location-wise as well, I think that really draws, certainly from the greater New York and New Jersey area, but also beyond. I mean, we've had people flying in from all over the country, all over the world to attend this, and it's just a beautiful time to be in New York City in early October.
Absolutely. I find myself taking a quick walk through Central Park and seeing the fall colors, which living in California, we miss a little bit of that flavor and color on the West Coast, but I always come back home and see the Central Park and the fall foliage. So that's also a nice addition.
Indeed, actually, looking out the window from the New York Athletic Club is a nice visual interlude from the sessions, which we try to make them conversational without the data dumps and no slides, but still it's nice to look at Central Park from the window.
Yeah, it really is. It's become one of my favorite meetings of all the ones that I attend. Let's talk about sponsors. Let's talk about partners for the organization and who we really think should come in and play a role here and help us put on the event, and who really can benefit, from having their name associated with us, having signage. Give us a sense of some of those players at this point, if you can.
One of the things that we've done with this meeting is we've leveraged the vast history, the 15-year history of AVBCC, and not only the pharmacos that have been involved on AVBCC and the market access commercial side, but also literally the academic and large community centers between, let's say, Duke to Dana-Farber. I mean, that entire East Coast corridor serves as a rich ground for the clinicians that are in the trenches, that are doing clinical trials, that are actively involved with pharma. And I think that the audience that we're bringing in kind of allows for that type of meaty and juicy discussion when it comes to how to advance clinical trials. We have day 2, which is more involved on that side. The investment community, it's right here in New York. So, it's not a full day, it's a half day. So investors can get to their early meetings, take a look at the big board, and then come over around lunchtime and really engage with straight from the horse's mouth, people that are in the trenches, that know what's going on, that are at the real forefront of the investment community, as well as the clinical community. So I think the two audiences would be mostly the people that are engaged in drug development from A to Z, entire ecosystem, the investment community that is always looking for that understanding. And, I think as Nick mentioned, the totality of discussions that only come not from reading a report or by hearing an analyst, but from really talking to the people that are in the trenches. So I think it's just a unique opportunity for both audiences.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who needs the holy grail, so to speak, which is strategic clarity. We're all inundated with data, and we're just throwing more technology and to some degree more money in the ecosystem, and we still do not have the strategic foresight that we need to really see the path to its completion and successful market entry and benefit to patients. And I think this is where the stakeholders that are going to attend this meeting are going to get the value, because at the end of the day, there is a transversal emergence of new ideas and new collaborations and new discussions and new funding that may come from this. And so it's, I would also posit that the analysts from the financial world, my hunch is that they're going to come to all of day 2, because the analysts are very hungry to learn from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and they will be vigilant to see what is being discussed in there. Because again, this is something that is not, it's not a 5,000 people meeting, and so they will have interest to see where their financial houses should really be putting money in.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's, as I said, the intimacy of the venue, of the ability to walk between meetings, and it is jam packed. I have been told that this is a meeting, certainly in terms of the quality of the content and the speakers and participants. It's also on steroids because we really, really pack a lot in. And so I tell people when they're attending, be ready to stay active and don't take any downtime, because you don't know who you're going to bump into in the hallway, or have a chance to meet perhaps at one of the meals or kind of like social gatherings that we have. And to that end, I know we conclude on Monday evening with a poster walk, which also is exciting from my perspective, because I know we want to really try to highlight some of the young investigators inside the Swim Across America network. But it's also, again, gives that chance for those young physician scientists and investigators to meet the top people in the world. And also, we give them a chance to really show off their work and show off their science. Stan, I know you've been a big proponent of doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we have the big banks that have the analysts that are really looking more on the M&A space and sort of what's going on in that whole sphere. But we're also targeting the VC market. And to the VCs, you want to find out what's up and coming, what's next. What are those unique opportunities? Maybe not to the extent that the analysts of the big banks are doing, but to the extent that you could hear from, I think there's over 200 investigators that have been part of Swim Across America over the years, and they're doing amazing work. The work that comes out of these academic centers frequently traverses and becomes the next, NUCO, the next investment opportunity. That's the place that a lot of these neat finds can be had. The venture capital market can get a chance to not only hear the macro picture, but can also interact with emerging scientists, with emerging ideas, emerging technology. And that's what kind of funnels that part of the investment ecosystem. So I'm a big proponent, not only on day one, but day two, to have the same posters up and giving people that maybe could not make day one a second bite at the apple. So to speak, of hearing from these investigators that are doing amazing work funded by Swim Across America.
Yeah.
And indeed, there are two types of poster walks, right? The first one is the classic poster walk that we do in the major meetings or even the smaller meetings that are focused on the science. And then there is the poster walks that people do in research days in biotech and pharma. But this one is different because you have the opportunity to not only have the mentors and people that are not your direct mentors, but mentors of the entire ecosystem, people that are giving the plenary sessions at ASCO and AACR and ESMO, come and look and discuss your poster, and the funding community. So it's I would say, the poster walk of the third kind.
Really, really excited, for the event coming up. Honored to be co-chair with both of you, and the amazing work that you have all done in terms of the cancer space and really moving the science and moving the opportunities for patients and to extend lives, to save lives, to improve lives. It's what it's all about. And both of you are just incredible leaders in the field, and we're just delighted to have you here, and I'm honored to be a co-chair with you. This wraps up the episode of Value-Based Voices, brought to you by the Association for Value-Based Cancer Care. Thank you, Nick and Stan, for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and certainly your enthusiasm about the cancer research space in general, and certainly the upcoming meeting. Stay tuned for more episodes that spotlight the voices and future of oncology, cancer care, and cancer research.